Some cars change history by being great, and then other cars change history by being horrible. And then there's the Edsel. Ford spent nearly $3 billion in today's money just hyping this car up. I mean, it was supposed to be a game changer, a brand new luxury division, the future of American automobiles. Instead, it crashed and burned so hard that Ford just had to kind of pretend it never existed.
It never happened. It never happened. This one was invented by a writer.
Yep, that's real. That's the front of the Ford Edsel. I mean, can you really blame Ford now? I know what you're thinking. Like, there's tons of 50s cars that have weird, awkward designs. But this one, I mean, this one was just, what are you thinking? Some people call it a horse collar grille. I don't see a horse collar. It looks to me like a toilet seat. And there's other opinions. I'll leave that for your interpretation. However, the grille was really just the beginning of the Edsel's problems. I mean, for one, the name was weird, the pricing was confusing, the tech constantly broke, the economy was tanking, and on top of that, it seemed like the workers just couldn't be bothered to build them right. And then somehow, to nobody's surprise, it turned out to be one of the biggest automotive disasters of all time. So I want to talk about it. How the Edsel destroyed itself. Let's start with the hype. Ford spent nearly 2 years hyping this car up before anyone even seen it. I mean, it's kind of like when a movie trailer comes out like 2 years before the movie drops, and everyone has all this time to talk about it and get all excited about the movie and go through the script and the cast and everything. And then by the time the movie comes out, it kind of can't live up to the expectations. Now, it seems as though Ford realized this about halfway through the Edsel project and just stopped trying entirely. So when the Edsel finally did launch in 1958, people were expecting the future. I mean, they were expecting a car that looked like something out of the Jetsons. And instead, they got this. I mean, that's like Apple spending 2 years teasing the next great innovation in computing, and then unveiling a Dell laptop from like 2007. Alright, now imagine you're starting a new car brand. Now, you could go with something powerful, something bold, something that commands attention. Ford did not do that. Instead, they named it after Henry Ford's son, Edsel. Now, Edsel Ford was a smart dude, don't get me wrong, but let's be real, who wants to drive a car named the Edsel? I mean, it's like naming a sports car the Kevin. Meanwhile, Chevrolet had names like the Bel Air and the Impala, Chrysler had the 300, Ford had the Thunderbird. And Ford's new great idea, you want to buy a new Edsel? No one wanted to buy a new Edsel. Ford figured that the Edsel would slide perfectly between Ford and Mercury. But here was the problem. It was too expensive for the average Ford buyer, and it just wasn't nice enough for the average Mercury buyer. Even worse, they launched 4 different Edsel models, all with different trim levels. I mean, it just added to the confusion around this car. It was a classic case of just overcomplication. Instead of making a car that everyone wanted, Ford made a car that nobody even liked. Hey, I'm coming. I'm just like 2 seconds away from finishing this video I was making.
No problem.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
Okay, honey.
Be right there.
Bye.
Now, launching a confusing and expensive car is pretty bad, but launching it right as the economy crashes, that's a disaster. The Edsel launched in 1958, which is right in the middle of a recession. People weren't spending on new fancy cars. They were saving their money, buying smaller, more practical vehicles, or they were just fixing their old ones. Meanwhile, Chevy and Plymouth were killing it with affordable and practical cars. Now let's say someone did go buy an Edsel. Well, that's where they really got to experience the pain. Instead of getting its own factory, the Edsel was built on the same assembly lines as Ford and Mercury models. The problem with that? Workers didn't really care about them. Cars rolled off the line with misaligned body panels, electrical issues, missing parts, I mean, you name it. But the worst offender? The teletouch transmission. Ford thought, hey, let's be really futuristic and put the buttons for our transmission on the steering wheel. I mean, I feel like I don't even need to explain how problematic that would be. I mean, think of how many cars you've driven that have the shifter on the steering wheel. I'll wait. I mean, it was supposed to be this new high-tech thing, instead it was just highly annoying. So how did all this turn out for Ford? Well, they expected to sell around 200,000 Edsels in their first year, and they sold about 60,000. By 1960, Ford just kind of quietly killed the brand. No big farewell, no final edition. They just kind of took it out back and, you know, they lost over $4 billion. I mean, by all measures, one of the biggest failures in automotive history. So, did the Edsel fail because it was the worst car ever made? Not exactly. It failed because Ford completely misread the market. Ford thought they were making the next big thing. Instead, they made one of the biggest automotive mistakes of all time.